Welcome back to episode 78 of the P.S. Gilmore story. And today we're going to be looking at P.S. Gilmore's death on September the 24th, 1892 in St. Louis. This was an event that caused national shock, I suppose. President Harrison was in his office and basically stopped his meetings and was heard to say Gilmore couldn't die. It says here the famous bandmaster expires suddenly at St. Louis. And indeed he did. The famous musician dies of heart disease at St. Louis. Gilmore was one of the most famous bandmasters in the world, and he was dead. Surrounded by his wife, daughter, and 3 spiritual ministers, he breathed in his last in his room in Lindell Hotel in St. Louis. And here was the advertisement for the last night that he performed, which was, if my memory serves me right, the Friday. And he was given 3 performances a day, conducting a wonderful, huge band of 100 impresarios. Patrick S. Gilmore, the Prince of Bandmasters, died suddenly of heart disease in St. Louis. He, after being appointed musical director of the World Fair. Now, that World's Fair was the upcoming 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago. And he had been appointed the musical director. What an achievement. And here's how one of the newspapers commemorated him. Everyone was in mourning. No one had thought that Gilmore would die, or indeed could die. It was just a shock. Gilmore's dead, yelled a small boy from the steps of the main entrance of the exposition building at 7:15 last night. The effect was electrical, and a profound hush followed the shocking announcement. "Gilmore's dead!" shouted the child again, and he sped down the stone steps and hastened away with hurrying bare feet. The news spread through St. Louis. Patrick Sarsfield Gilmore of the famous bandmaster is dead, surrounded by his wife. His band was playing at the St. Louis Exposition under the direction of Assistant Director Charles Freudenthal. And when the sad news broke, sad news was borne them by many of the older members. They stopped playing. The death of Gilmore, the celebrated bandmaster, is announced from New York, born near Dublin, and it went into details about what he had composed and what he had done and so on. At the very end of this, it says, visiting England about 12 years ago, he gave several performances at Crystal Palace. And this was how everyone remembered Gilmore, the quiet, the humble, the highly talented leader of the greatest band in the world. And this was the concert program that they were working on working from at this moment in time, which had been written by Gilmore himself. Gilmore's famous band concerts, P.S. Gilmore director. This is from my collection. And here inside was the only lithograph of the 100 members of the band. And this band was 100 members. 100 members. This had not been done before, except on a rare occasion by La Scala in Milan. So here we have the band accurately portrayed. And this was one member of the band who basically put together a scrapbook, which I now have, and he kept if you like, his record of that band and so on, starting with his band ticket from 1892, a band ticket numbered 79 top left-hand corner, and his name was Frank Gross, or Gross. And he was one of the members of the band. And it came as a shock to him. He was not a long-term member of the band. Maybe he'd been hired in regularly. We haven't got that many roster lists to say exactly when he was hired. But in that concert program, we had the instrumentation of Gilmore's 100, which was the name given to this wonderful band that was going to prepare for the World Exposition. What the press says about Gilmore's 100, a grand outpouring, closing scenes at the Great St. Louis Exposition. Gilmore's 100 played Auld Lang Syne, and the audience went wild. A wonderful organization. This article isn't too complimentary. Late Mr. Gilmore was the picturesque figure in the music world. Further on down, by the death of Patrick Sarsfield Gilmore, there has passed away one of the most picturesque leaders in the American world of music, with no talent for composition, with but little talent even for adapting music, and without being in any sense a great musician or a leader who has contributed, and on it went. So not everyone was highly enamored by Mr. Gilmore. Here is Gilmore's own descriptive article on the greatest band in the world, his band, which had been declared in 1878 by the Germans at that time, and it was now been recognized in America itself. After Gilmore died on October the 29th at 8 o'clock, Gilmore's famous band of 100 musicians, the first appearance of Colonel D.W. Reeves, the new leader, first appearance of the noted singers, and so on. This was a new chapter. And here's the article by that bandmaster. His name was D.W. Reeves. He was the musical director. And here is the actual concert program from that date. And it was the worry at that time was that the band would actually disappear, that it couldn't exist without Gilmore. Here's a description of the actual concert, and in this review, it basically goes into the details of how much talent this band actually had and the soloists within. Here's how people in some articles remembered Gilmore with all of his medals, and of course the 22 on his hat, referring to the 22nd Regiment of New York, for which he was assigned to. And so it was the end of an era as such. It gave Sousa the opportunity that he wanted. But all throughout the country, for instance, here's the Irish World newspaper in New York, the biggest selling newspaper in New York at the time. And the whole page, the front page, is Gilmore, with that large portrait of him on the front page. And on the left, it says tributes to Gilmore. Comments from all over, from cities, from people, and so on. And there was movements immediately started throughout America to erect statues, to erect busts, to erect tributes to Gilmore itself. Gilmore's band to dissolve. This was one of the fears. Gilmore's band will disband after playing its Cincinnati engagement tomorrow night. The band played here last night, and the box receipts were attached by the Gatesburg Opera House for the failure, basically, to fill the house. Reception of Gilmore's body. The body of Patrick Sarsfield Gilmore arrived at Grand Central Depot this morning. On the funeral train accompanying the body were Mrs. Gilmore, her daughter Minnie Gilmore, the band, the committee of three, Lawrence O'Reilly, William Schultz and Herman Stillman, and three directors of the Musical Protective Union. Further on, it mentions that the crowds were waiting here for his body to arrive, and at the bottom it says, directly behind her walked Mrs. Gilmore beside Edward O'Mahony, an intimate friend of the family who had met them at the depot. Not only was O'Mahony an intimate friend of the family and Gilmore, he was also the bass profundo on a number of tours for the band, and he came from Cork City in Ireland. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been great talking to you, and I hope you've enjoyed. Documentary will be back next week with more, and we'll be starting to finish off, for the moment, the Gilmore story. Thank you very much, and bye now.